fucking head. It was in the relish and onions, and it was talking.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you guys would be so kind, please introduce yourselves.
Luke, I play drums.
I'm Joy. I am the vocalist and second guitarist.
And I'm Nicholas. I play guitar.
And what is the name of your band?
Eye of Nix.
And how would you describe the music of Eye of Nix?
Well, I would say that we will utilize various styles, sounds, and moods in order to express a sound that is sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, and sometimes psychedelic. We have a lot of different influences, and so sometimes they come through the music in different ways. So Black metal, doom metal could also be included.
I usually
Yeah.
just call this experimental metal band.
Yeah.
It's because it's all sorts of different styles of metal, but we also have a whole bunch of weird noise and psychedelic and goth kind of elements. So it's just experimental metal, really.
As the new guy and like someone who used to do sound for the band all the time, I kind of thought it was just like some crazy, heavy, like goth noise rock band that like super heavily like sounded like some elements of Neurosis that I liked a lot. So that was why I was like wanted to join.
Do you guys prefer the term experimental metal to other terms like, for example, progressive or avant-garde?
I mean, I think all three of those terms have different connotations to different people. And, you know, we really, it's always been kind of an issue trying to pinpoint a genre name for us. So we kind of just been leaving that to the writers these days.
And as you mentioned, your music encompasses several different styles and feelings. As you mentioned, black metal, doom metal, a little bit of ambient experimental. What would you say the through line is that unites all your music? What makes a song Eye of Nix?
Well, for me personally, it's kind of like a tone, kind of like a feeling of it. Like, I mean, because I've worked with so much different kinds of styles of music, it's like there's a tonality both with like which kinds of keys and chords we use, and there's a kind of a power, like a dark aggression that we put to our songs. It's like we have a joke we used to always say where it's like I would play something and Joy would look at me and say, "More evil." And so I just like adjust the chords a little bit to make it a little bit darker, a little bit more interesting, because there's so much music that's very like super tonal, super blues based. It's just kind of like stagnant and boring. But by playing with chords and playing with keys and things like that, it creates this tension and this. I think it's pretty. I think it's beautiful. And so usually when I'm writing Eye of Nix songs, I try to find something that feels that way, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. And I think on kind of a lyrical level for myself, with Eye of Nix, I tend to write about subjects that are more, versatile in their emotional content rather than something that's based on current events or anything like that. It tends to be very more rooted in something that is aimed at being more timeless.
So given that your music encompasses several different styles and moods, is there anything that you wouldn't do within the realm of Eye of Nix? I mean, you mentioned wanting your music to be more evil at times.
Personally, I try not to let it sound like other things. I try to keep it unique and interesting. So it's like if something sounds too quote unquote stock, it's like, why do we need to have another Electric Wizard? They're doing a really great job at that. We don't need to do that. So we can try to do our version of that. So it's like I don't think we really want to get into the habit of completely copying really great bands that have done really awesome things. I mean, if we sound similar to them, that's fine, but I don't really want to just be like this cool riff, it's awesome band, because so many people are doing that really, really well.
So let's go over the background of the band a little bit. Tell me how you guys all met and why you decided to form a band together.
This is probably around 8 years ago. I just wanted to form a band with traditional instrumentation for the most part, and I wanted to try my hand at doing a more, a different style of vocals than I had been doing. I was really inspired by bands like Ludacra and Neurosis, and just kind of, I asked a few friends if they wanted to try playing together, and we just kept doing it. And we started writing songs. We did like a couple of covers first, but then we just started writing songs pretty much right away. And it was kind of my idea to see what would happen, because I felt like I went out to see a lot of bands in Seattle, and like Nick was saying, like, oh, sometimes you just hear a band and you go, wow, that sounds like a crappier version of, somebody great. Well, I don't want to do that. I think we should try to see if we can come up with something that's new or at least that, even if it's rooted in these established styles or moods, like to be able to make it sound different because we're using a different type of guitar, or we're using a different, different drum techniques, or kind of fusing some different styles together. And people kept saying that they really enjoyed what we were doing with it, and that it was different. So now we're on our third full-length album, and we still feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface on the possibilities.
Yeah, I think back in the starting of the band, I remember meeting with Joy and Chris at a bar, and her proposing the idea. And the idea was to do like one show, maybe two shows. But then once we started rehearsing together, like you said, we started writing material right away. And we did those shows, but we just kind of started doing more shows. So it just kind of kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And before we knew it, we had, enough stuff and enough time in to record an album and go on tour.
Joy, you mentioned using different vocal techniques. You handle all the vocals for Eye of Nix, right?
For the most part, but we do have a few songs where Zach does, our bass player, does add his vocals in on several songs. And in our previous lineup on the first couple of albums, there was, well, at least on the first album, there was a couple of songs that our drummer did some vocals on as well.
But in general, are you handling both the screaming vocals and the clean vocals?
Yes.
Were you classically trained?
Yes.
So this is, I think, one of the things that makes Eye of Nix stand out from most other doom and even to an extent progressive or avant-garde metal bands is your vocal approach. Very few people can do that. Was that something that you had in mind? You keep mentioning that you guys wanted to do something that was different from what other bands were doing. Was part of the intent to combine these kind of classical vocals with, let's say, like black or sludge metal?
Well, I decided to utilize that technique on a few songs because it's available to me. I also had to learn how to do very delicate, more kind of breathy style vocals because that's something that I was not accustomed to doing. And so I kind of learned how to do that for this album that we just created. So I really enjoy just learning new ways of being expressive and incorporating those into the band.
When you guys first started writing material, how clear a picture did you have of what kind of music you wanted to make?
I don't think we had a clear picture at all.
Especially this being like a couple new people, and as someone who used to see Eye of Nix all the time, I as every drummer, we're like, I know what I would do, and like I was just so excited to like try my style and overcome like just like the double bass thing and just do weird single kick stuff and more like bizarre proggier jazz fusionish stuff, which was a different thing I think for us. And working me and Zach playing bass, just we had some stuff to show them that might have been a different approach, like some more drum and bass oriented stuff to add like big guitars to.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this band that I've always enjoyed about it is it's always been a good mixture of the 5 people in it. So the original lineup, that was a mixture of those 5 people. And then having Zach and Luke join the band, it's now a mixture of this new 5 people. And that's kind of just what it is. Like we're trying to see what happens when you take these different types of musicians and put them all in the same band.
Do you guys write as a band?
It's a mixture. Joey writes all the words.
Okay.
I would think that we primarily, there's several people in the band who can write on guitar or keyboard or bass. So we kind of have general ideas or maybe a section of a song that we'll come in with, and then people will have opinions about it or maybe something to add. Or, there's been one or two times when Nick or I came in with most of a song, for the most part written, the core of it written. But a lot of times it does become kind of this like hybrid or pastiche type experience where, people have suggestions and I think it's good because when we finally, at the end result is something that we all agreed was good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we've been trying to do like, I've been coming up with drum beats to like start a skeleton off and just seeing just rolling the dice with that. And the stuff we've been working on before COVID is pretty awesome to just try just weird, drum exercise stuff that we can build crescendos off of.
June 19th, you released your, I believe, your fourth album, Ligeia. Tell me a little bit about this album. Tell me about the writing process and what you guys hope to accomplish with the album.
Well, it's actually our third album. We had a demo out before that.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, it's all good. I think what the main thing I was trying to embrace with making this record was to capture what this group of 5 people sound like, because we had been working together for a while, but we didn't have any recorded material of this lineup. And these songs just kind of started coming together, and they just sounded so full of life and so much better with this lineup that I was like, yes, let's do this. So that, for me personally, that was like the main drive, is like, how do we make an Eye of Nix record that sounds like what we sound like and make it sound as good as possible? That's kind of what my main thing was for it.
I would say, we had a couple of songs that kind of had a little bit of their origins, or a good portion of their origins, that were still being worked on when we were forming the new lineup. And so it was kind of like we had this really great place to jump off from there. And then once we started really getting into it and writing together, then the rest of the album just really started to get written really quickly. And when we decided to work with Michael Zeck as producer and to record the album, and we set some dates and timelines and everything, then we really hit all of these songs really hard. We played most of them out at least a few times, and some of them we played quite a bit before going into the studio. But there was one song on this album that we were still kind of writing a little bit of it in the studio, and I feel extremely confident about that song, and I think that it turned out even better than I could have imagined, because during that time we had like 6 or 7 people in the studio. We had the band members obviously, but also engineer and assistant engineer to kind of be there just for the last little finishing touches. And I feel great about the whole recording process. I thought it was the best experience that I've had so far in my music career.
Plus, I really liked how there's like 3 or 4 different styles. So we end up playing with a lot of different bands, from either black metal to doom to weird prog and grind. So it's like we have like a whole deck of cards to pull from when we want to play a certain type of set list now. And sometimes it might confuse people, but to me, I think it's like a win for us.
Do you cater your set lists to whichever band you might be with or playing with?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's going to be a great setting, a great experience to play some of the more softer pieces. It's just going to be more appropriate there, or depending on the venue. Some venues, it's never going to be quiet enough to play a song like Adrift live, because you're always going to hear lots of shit coming out from the street or whatever. So we just are able to curate the sets, I would say.
So let's get back to the recording of the album. You mentioned working with Michael Zeck. Tell me why you chose to work with Michael.
Because he wanted to work with us. And several of us really loved the work that he did with Ruins of Beverast. And then he sent me his, in the last Secrets of the Moon record too, but he sent me the most recent Secrets of the Moon record, and I was like, if you just combine all of the things that he's been doing in the last few years, I was like, this is what I want our album to sound like. And, Zach was totally into the idea, and these guys and Masaki, we all just agreed, like, this is going to be a great option for us.
In addition to Michael Zeck, the album was mastered by James Plotkin. Plotkin's got too many too many credits to list, but I think readers of my blog will know me as a really big fan of his band Old. Tell me how Plotkin got involved with this.
Well, our bass player Zach, he has his own band called Hissing, like a death metal, like an experimental death metal band, and they had just worked with him on mastering their record, and they had a lot of things that would be kind of difficult to tackle on the mastering end, and it turned out great. So, you know, I've worked with a few different mastering engineers, and we just decided that James he just seemed to have a lot of experience dealing with albums that have a huge dynamic range. So that's what we really wanted to work with him.
And having his name attached to didn't hurt either. I love a lot of the stuff he's mastered, especially a lot of the synthesizer stuff and some of the crazy metal.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, if you could work with him, why not, you know?
Yeah, and it wasn't that expensive. He was very well a decent price for what we got out of it.
Tell me about the title Ligeia and what it refers to.
So when I was working on finding like the lyrical thread between all of the songs, I really felt like the mythology of the siren was something that was really personal to me, having nothing to do with being a singer or anything like that. This is totally separate, but I just feel as though, you know, all of us, or at least people in our lives, if not us ourselves, have been, and people in general are just very easily lured in by things or deceived by things. And I feel like sometimes when you're going through like really, really difficult times in your life, something can seem like it's just going to be an amazing escape, an amazing way out, you know, and it's a lot of times it's just not true. There's very destructive forces in the world, and I feel like people are easily taken in by them. And I felt like that's kind of the picture that I was seeing from what I was exploring lyrically, and I just kind of moved forward with that idea through to the end.
When you say that there's a thread through the lyrics, would you describe Ligeia as being a concept album?
Well, I think that the songs all stand on their own individually, but it's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like if you are walking through the woods and you see that there's a path there. It doesn't have to be a path if you don't want it to be, but you could look, if you just kind of zone out on it for a minute, you'll see there's definitely a path. But on this album, more than any other of our previous ones, I definitely was trying to intermesh some of the songs lyrically and with little melodic elements as well, you know, kind of like an internal rhyme idea, but with the musical themes.
There is a video for the song Concealing Waters, which is the first song on the album. Tell me a little bit about the concept behind the video.
Well, sorry.
Well, okay. So, I mean, in knowing that Ligeia refers to the sirens from Greek mythology, that was the first thing I thought of when I watched the video, because water and rivers are a big part of the video and a recurring theme within the video, and the narrative, if you want to call it that, centers on a couple women, and so that was the connection I made. I don't know if that was the concept that you wanted or intended.
Yeah, so basically I have the idea that there was this kind of idea that, you know, if you go searching for this mysterious river of Lethe, then you may come across, you're going in search of it in order to erase memories, in order to wash away memories. And when you go in life to try to erase your memories or try to drown them, usually what ends up happening is you end up having to confront a lot more things than you think you will. And for me, the story of the wanderer in the forest is basically like the older version of yourself and the younger version of yourself will become entwined in some way. And, you know, drinking from the river is not really going to, it's not going to transform. You're still going to be, you know, she's still going to be herself, was kind of the way we looked at it. But what we really wanted to do with the video was to leave it very open to interpretation. So there's definitely the siren myth is there. There's also this kind of more personal viewpoint, and there's also kind of a modern fairy tale with the old witch and the young wanderer, you know. So I worked with my creative team, and we kind of came up with this concept. It would be like a new folk tale.
And Joy, you were involved in the production aspects of the video, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that part of putting the video together with the director?
So I wrote out a script, and then I consulted with Anima Nocturna, who's also the person who we've been working with for the last 2 albums on our album art. And I've worked with him on other projects as well, including other albums and other live performances, like installations and things like that. So I worked with him on, you know, how will we bring this idea to life visually? And then we consulted with the director. We had production meetings with the director about, you know, where do we want to film, light, you know, daylight, all different kinds of technical things that happen. But I found one of the filming locations, and then our director found another filming location. And I worked on, you know, basically I came up with a lot of concepts for like costuming and props, and then worked with Anima Nocturna for sourcing a lot of props. He has a lot of personal items as well, and we utilized items from our mothers and aunts in order to, and from my own life, actual items that I took from my mother's house, and we worked those into the design as well.
Can you tell me the meaning behind the curved knife that appears in the video?
Yeah, that's an item that belongs to him, and maybe if you interview him, he could tell you more.
Okay. No, I'm just curious because I'm based in Malaysia, and we have a curved ceremonial dagger called a crease, which is very similar to that.
So I'll give the listeners a little bit of background as to what just happened. We were having a very engaging and pleasant conversation, and then I brought up the music of Seattle Past, and my computer killed itself. So maybe we should move on to other topics. I mean, just in brief, because of my age, I'm in my 40s, and so I have very specific memories and perceptions when somebody refers to a band from Seattle or music from Seattle. And so I'm just curious as to how you guys feel about those perceptions and maybe the legacy that your city has, and B, what the nature of the metal scene is like now, because I understand there's a fairly thriving death and black metal scene coming out of Seattle and Washington State in general.
We're all the same age as you, so I don't know. I think I was not goth when that stuff came out, so I was like super into Nirvana and Mudhoney. And I'm a huge Melvins fan, and still am. Not so much Mudhoney anymore, or Nirvana, but this city has like made everyone kind of have that like Melvin sound kind of in their blood, especially the people that grew up here. Like you might have heard of this band called Helms Elite. They're an awesome like Sonic Youth meets Melvins kind of band, and there's a lot of that going on. And I think we have a tiny bit of that going on in one of our songs called Curies, which is like, I don't think you guys realized it, but when you came up with that riff, I was like, I'm gonna do like my Dale Kroger homage, just with like the crazy kick drum and just like that one fill on repeat over and over again on purpose. But there was a lot of kids like loving the old school death metal, Suffocation kind of stuff too, and black metal, and the mountain range, so that goes with it, I guess. What do you guys think about the kids?
Well, I mean, I think that just because of the kind of those of us who are even if we didn't grow up here, I mean, I've lived here for a long time, and I really love the mood and weather of this place, and it's completely suited to my personality. And I think that writing, it's great to live in a place where your taste matches the mood of your environment. And there's a lot of people around who feel the same way. And that's why I think we have some very popular doom metal bands here as well. And there's, we've always had a very healthy, weird, underground noise and dark ambient music scene around here. And that there's a little bit of crossover there between that scene and the scene of bands, which is kind of where Masaki and I were coming from most recently. So I think also, there's a lot of cannabis enjoyment around here as well. And the legality of that was the talk of legends before I ever moved to Seattle. There was people in other parts of the country who already thought it was legal here. And we're not a stoner band by any means, but it's just kind of the whole, I feel like we have a thread that I feel even more so just not so much a thread that leads to Seattle, but I have a thread that leads back to psychedelic music from the San Francisco Bay Area. And, when we go on tour, when we come back to the West Coast and get up towards the Bay, it's like I can feel like, oh, my people, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, I'm probably just rambling now.
I think the Seattle that I know has always been a Seattle of two identities. There's the kind of post-grunge, hey, you can make it, you can be a big band, you can get your indie cred, you can do whatever you want. And then there's been this thriving, really beautiful underground. And whether it's the noise scene, the goth scene, the metal scene, there's just this layer underneath all like the pomp and circumstance of the popular bands that is really healthy and really awesome and very welcoming and diverse. And like, cause like whether it's the metal scene, the goth scene, the experimental scene, or even in the country western scene, which one of my other bands is part of, there's like the bands that are trying to make it, and they do make it, and they do really well. And then there's the bands that are just like doing the work and making really amazing music that's kind of fucked up in a weird way. But they're just, it's a bit of a community, and it's always been that way since I've lived up here for the last 20 years. It's getting less so because of gentrification, but that's kind of the story of most American cities right now.
Just real quick before we move on to other things, can you expand on the idea of the mood of the city and the weather? Because I'm not sure if everyone listening to this podcast from other parts of the world will understand what you mean by that.
Sure. Many, many, many days where the sky is a lot of different shades of gray and dark blue. And I'm not going to say it rains here all the time, but it rains here a lot more than it does in a lot of the. And, you know, people become obsessed with those few fleeting moments of sunny days, but then, like, once we have too many of them in a row, everyone's getting mad again and wants it to go away.
It's like they'll complain it's raining, and then when it's sunny for like a week straight, they just can't handle that either.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny.
Well, I never complain about the rain, though. That's the difference. But yeah, after about 3 days of sun, I'm done. But, you know, we have the natural area around Seattle. We do have some of the only rainforest in the United States is just a short drive from here. And like, for example, if you're planning on going camping or going to play an outdoor music festival, then you're going to get rained on. If you go outside of the more urban areas and go out into the wilderness, you're going to get rained on. And it's a beautiful sound. It's a nice, gentle rain most of the time, but it's just kind of, we have a lot of misty mountains and beautiful valleys that are filled with little clouds, and it's just an incredibly beautiful place. And we have a lot of people around here who are trying to keep it that way and don't want to lose all of that natural beauty.
So people listening to the podcast won't be able to tell this, but as I'm interviewing you guys, the three of you are wearing masks, the COVID masks, and we are in an extremely interesting time for bands who play live and tour and need to do those things to promote their music. With that in mind, what plans do you guys have for the future? What's next for you?
Well, we don't have anything set in stone right now because it's just not possible. I mean, because of the way the United States economic system is set up and how there's not really any windfall or safety net for musicians or music venues or anything. I mean, you're just kind of on your own when the shit hits the fan here. So, you know, it would be nice to go, well, we'll just book a tour for next year. But the problem is we don't even know if any of those venues will still be there in a year. So right now, the situation as far as touring goes is pretty much completely up in the air. But we are focusing on getting the word out about this new album that we've worked incredibly hard on and that we feel incredibly proud of how it turned out, and we feel very good about our performances. And we want to share the artwork with you. We want to share the music with you. And we're working on making a couple of more videos for a couple more songs that would come out later this year. We had other plans to do more video shoots, but with the pandemic happening, those had to be canceled. So, you know, we're trying to come up with creative ways to still maintain all of our same level of creativity, and we just have to find new ways of doing it during this time.
So the new Eye of Nix album is called Ligeia, and it's out now through Prophecy Productions. Tell people what the best way to order it is.
The best way to order would be to go to the Prophecy website, prophecy.de, and from there you can get we have two different colored vinyl, and there's purple and black vinyl. We also have CDs available with a 12-page booklet, and we also have a 2 CD version with a 72-page full-color art book that has a hardcover. And on that edition, the second disc is covers and remixes of the songs on Ligeia by our side projects. And Luke also did a solo keyboard version of one of the songs.
Tell me about this expanded Luxus version. You mentioned songs by your side projects. What are the extra tracks on the album?
Well, we wanted to we have so much really good artwork for this album that we wanted a way to present it. And Prophecy does these really cool art books. And we were like, that would be great to do one of those so we could include a lot of this artwork. But we kind of used all the songs on the album were kind of like, this is the album. We don't really have an extra song to just throw on there. And so while we were working on it, we kind of had this really silly idea. It's like, let's take various songs off this album and hand it off to ourselves and see what it sounds like. So it's like there's a version of Luke, who is a keyboard player, doing a version for him. I have a couple different bands as well, and I did an acoustic stripped down version for one of my other bands, which is a very different interpretation. And Joy and Masaki did a To End It All version of it. So we just kind of like thought that would be really silly. It's like, and fun and interesting to kind of have this compilation CD of covers of our music by us and a friend or two.
So this goes back to my earlier question about if there's anything that you wouldn't do within the realm of Eye of Nix. When you're reinterpreting your own music through a different project or different style, where's the overlap and where's the difference?
Well, for me personally, the difference between the project that I did the cover with, which was my project called Wicked, and the Eye of Nix, is that for that song specifically, there was a good amount of that I had come up already, and I had come up at home and brought to the band, and I had written on an acoustic guitar. And so I had started it there, brought it to the band, and then we flushed it out and wrote all the rest of the parts and everything. And I thought it would be an interesting way to kind of show not only the origin of that song, but also how it could have gone a different way if I would have run it through a different band. So that's what I did with that song Tempest, is I reinterpreted basically my original version of that song for acoustic guitar. And also I'm a very different singer. One could say I'm a horrible singer compared to Joy. And so we basically, and having me sing her words, it felt different and it felt odd because I normally don't sing other people's words, but it just kind of has this completely different feel. And I think that song specifically is a good example of where a song can start and how it can become an Eye of Nix song, or where a song can start and how it can become a different project song.
I would say, so To End It All is a duo project that Masaki and I have been doing for several years together, where we limit ourselves as far as our equipment goes. So it's just samplers, voice, keyboard. It's like stuff you can pack into a Corolla and drive around and tour or play a show or whatever, or take on an airplane, basically, without having to check a bunch of equipment. So we usually do, death industrial music, or sometimes I do kind of more neoclassical sounding pieces mixed in with the death industrial and harsh wall noise stuff. And so we decided to make a version of an Eye of Nix song that we could play as To End It All, because it just seemed like, for some reason, we wanted to do it. And then when we had this idea of doing the second disc for Ligeia, we were like, well, we could record this, because we had just been kind of doing it because we liked the idea, but we weren't planning on recording it or anything like that. And then Zach did a solo kind of reimagining of a couple of the themes from one of the songs as well. So, and going on what Nick was saying earlier, one of the things that I really enjoy doing, that I just kind of do in my daily life, is when I hear a piece of music, I can kind of like envision what it would sound like in a different genre. It's kind of like translating into different languages or something. And I thought this was a really interesting opportunity for us to show that everybody in this band thinks that way. And I think that could be the thing that kind of ties us together.
Yeah, and that's why I chose Carrie's. It's just like one riff. So I was like, why don't I just use all my favorite keyboard presets and make this like John Carpenter Halloween soundtrack? Yeah. And it was super fun to record. And it took like a couple hours, but it was like, got the drum machine out and like every awesome Roland preset I could find. So that was fun.
Yeah, Roland, you hear that? We want a sponsorship.
Gretsch, Roland.
And if people want to follow Eye of Nix online, what is the best way to do that?
You can go to eyeofnix.com, or you can go to any of the regular social media sites.
Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you guys want to talk about your other projects? Just let people know what you're up to when you're not Eye of Nix.
Sure.
Yeah. I guess I'll go first. I have 2 other bands. One is Wicked, which is on the deluxe edition of Ligeia. And that's a kind of like I call it my folk band, because it's me playing acoustic guitar and singing, but I'm joined by a drummer for it. So it's really stripped down, but it's pretty dark still. And then I also have a psychedelic country western band called Michael Ray and the Plastic Sheets. That's just it's country western music with a bit of a bluesy, psychedelic, weirdness to it. That's about it. Yeah. That's how I describe that.
Yeah, I mentioned Who Ended All is my other project, and Saki and I do together. I also sometimes work with a Buto dance performer named Vanessa Sconsa, and sometimes Misaki and I will both provide music for her performances, or sometimes I'll just collaborate with her on something, and we've been working with her for over a decade now on various projects. So that's another thing that I really like to do.
And I was playing keyboard in prog progressive like rock band. That's kind of a combination of Van Halen and like Carcass. It's like super fun party rock. But unfortunately, our drummer passed away a few months ago, so just kind of.
I'm sorry.
Yes, but we're working on like the EP that he did all these drum tracks, and we're getting pretty close. It's definitely one hell of a party. And Space Bag. Yeah, and we're called Space Bag.
Is there anything else you guys want to say?
I just want to say thank you for asking us to sit down with you and have this conversation, because it was totally out of the blue, and we really had a lot of fun.
First time we've seen each other in months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen each other like individually, but we haven't had this many of us together in a little while, so yeah.
Thanks for providing the opportunity.
Cool. Thank you guys.
What if that guy's head is still talking and he tells the cops everything?